Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to Storytelling Through Art. We're just so delighted that you're here. And please go ahead and post a greeting in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. We're going to be on the call for about the next hour and 15 minutes. And just to do some housekeeping while we have some other guests joining us and rolling in, I'd like to let everyone know that there's closed caption, which has been enabled. So you have the option to turn that view on. And there's some instructions in the chat to do that. Also, everyone has been muted to help us control our background noise. We will be having opportunities for you to unmute and participate. So for right now, we're going to be using the chat. If you have any questions and comments, go ahead and use the chat, and we'll be monitoring that and checking that periodically to share out. I also wanted everyone to know that this call is being recorded and that we are gathering in this space as a reminder, a collegial space where we're respectful of our varying and diverse perspectives. So thank you for joining us this evening. As we gather around, please go ahead and get some paper and pencils. We're going to be doing some drawing. If you have a sketchbook or a journal that you would like to pull in handy, go ahead and gather that. And yeah, I'd just like to welcome everyone. I know that we have a lot of people joining on the call, so go ahead and get settled. Right, and as we begin, I'd like to introduce my colleagues here and everyone that is working on the ARTEFFECT side. So first I'll introduce myself. I'm Tony Guglielmo. I know many of you have seen me on these calls, so just quick introduction. I'm Director of ARTEFFECT, and I've been in this position since January of 2023, leading ARTEFFECT, an arts education initiative from the Lowell Milken Family Foundation in Santa Monica. And we are a nationwide initiative. We have people joining us from all around the country this evening. So it's very exciting. And my team mates that are also with me here in Santa Monica, California, I'll have them say a quick hello. We have Emmy Mata, Program Coordinator.
Oh, sorry. Hello, everybody. So excited to be here with you tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time to join our session. As Tony mentioned, I'm a program coordinator, also based in Santa Monica with ARTEFFECT, and I'm really looking forward to this session.
Great. Thank you, Emmy. And also on the call is Connor Walden, who's operating our Zoom.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Connor, and I'm a program coordinator as well with ARTEFFECT in Santa Monica, and I'll be the Zoom master today. But just really excited for all y'all to be here and to hear more of what Brad has to say.
Great, thank you, Emmy and Connor. And also, I wanted just to mention our founder, Mr. Lowell Milken, who is part of our team. And Lowell has been overseeing, founding and overseeing ARTEFFECT and the Lowell Milken Center for Unsung Heroes. And it is through his vision and his commitment to engaging communities through education and innovation that this program is possible. So he's not here this evening, but does stay connected with us. And so that's our team here. And I'd also like to welcome on the call our ambassadors, our ARTEFFECT ambassadors. ARTEFFECT runs professional development, which is including this session. We offer an online visual arts fellowship. This year, we're in year 2 of our ARTEFFECT ambassadors program, and we have 34 educators that are middle and high school educators joining us from across the nation that are engaged in a year-long fellowship to bring the stories of unsung heroes into their classrooms and communities. So welcome to all of our ambassadors. I'm also seeing some familiar names from last year's cohort. So I'd just like to also welcome back our 2023-2024 ambassadors who are doing another go-around. So exciting to see you on the call this evening. Great, and I want to just give an overview of ARTEFFECT for just to set the context for those of you that are new very quickly. ARTEFFECT, as I mentioned, is a nationwide initiative. We invite educators and their students to explore the inspiring and diverse stories of Lowell Milken Center Unsung Heroes and their invaluable lessons as role models through the visual arts. So at ARTEFFECT offers right now professional development that you're taking part in, the ambassadors program, like I mentioned, which is our online fellowship. We also run an annual student art competition that has been running since 2016. And we also have exhibitions of award-winning student artworks online and at our center in Fort Scott, Kansas. And I would just like to quickly drill down on the unsung heroes. So unsung heroes, when we're speaking of them, are individuals that the center has an expanding list of individuals from history who are not commonly known, but who have demonstrated altruistic qualities and service to others in society, qualities such as courage, compassion, perseverance, sacrifice, conviction, and they took actions that positively and profoundly had an impact on the course of history. And so we are going to be exploring these individuals in the lesson plan and talking more about them this evening. And so now I would like to introduce our instructor, Mr. Brad LeDuc. And I just want to say that as we were talking about creating this module, Brad and I were thinking of ways that we could really help students engage with the stories of these unsung heroes from history in more creative interpretations of their heroic acts and character traits. Typically, students will create portraits because they see a portrait of an individual from history. And so this module, Storytelling Through Art, is really a resource and a lesson plan where Brad is bringing his expertise in supporting students in creative ways and to tell these stories that come to the story through many different angles and that really create like a narrative work of art more than just a portrait. So it's really my pleasure to introduce Brad. I'm going to have him introduce himself, but I just want to say he has been involved with ARTEFFECT since its inception, and we're just delighted to have him here joining us from Topeka, Kansas this evening. So Brad, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tony. Hey, it's great to be here, everyone. Thank you, Tony, and the ARTEFFECT crew for the opportunity to be here tonight. I want to start off by sincerely thanking every one of you for taking an hour out of your busiest week of the year, probably, to be here. We have finals, grading, scholastic art. I just know it's a busy, busy week. So we realize there are a million things on your plate, and just thank you so much for being here. So yes, this is my 24th year in the classroom. I began my career as a K-12 art teacher, teaching in a small rural community in Kansas. And then I currently teach in one of the largest high schools here in the state, and am primarily a 2D art teacher where I teach our painting classes, AP, and then also design. So tonight we're going to kick off the session today with some examples of various unsung hero projects that I've incorporated into my classroom over the past 10 years. And exploring art of storytelling, we'll spend a few minutes reflecting on our preconceived ideas about storytelling. And I know I had a lot of them. We'll then do an interactive activity over scanning and describing, where we will practice our ability to listen and translate a work of art. And then we'll introduce the date model, a tool to help students feel comfortable interacting with new works of art. We'll take a look at a graphic called the Unsung Heroes Journey, which will help us later and our students understand and break down the key components of a story, followed by an ideation activity where we'll generate multiple ideas quickly. Then we'll sprinkle in a few extension activities at the end, kind of wrap it up with a Q&A session. So at the beginning of each school year, students in my advanced art class, we begin the semester by honoring one person in our building as an unsung hero. We do this by creating an oversized 7 by 9 foot portrait in the style of artist Chuck Close. This is a collaborative project where students work together in groups of 5 to 10 to build community in the classroom and our building while using their gifts to love on others. Over the years, I've had students create over 20 of these large-scale projects. They have a short turnaround. We do this at the very beginning of the school year. Students have 2 to 3 weeks to create these. They collectively work together and then begin by selecting their topic. They have to collectively decide on who that's going to be in the building. They invite them in and they photograph them, and then they begin their drawings. Last few years, there's been some paintings. Over the years, they have selected teachers, administrators, custodians, and even students, each with a unique story that has impacted our school community in a positive way. So I'm going to show you a few of these. This work by Joe Simons was completed during the fall of 2020, right after COVID. And it's the only portrait that was never like fit together until the very end, which reflects the situation of having those AB days when we had all students never being present on the same day for critique. So the product here definitely reflects the process or the lack of process that was necessary to complete it in those teaching circumstances of that time. So during the creation of these portraits, students invite their unsung hero that they've selected in the building back in. They do a sit-down interview with a list of questions that they've prepared ahead of time, trying to unearth their topic's heroic traits, which are used to write an essay. These essays that the students write are then read aloud during the presentation of the portraits to their heroes, and then hung with the work that hangs in the building for a year. And boy, over the years, the interviews with the unsung heroes have definitely like quickly become like one of my personal favorite parts of the project, where they get to interact with those people. So during the infancy of the ARTEFFECT program, our AP art class at Washburn Rural High School was given the opportunity to pilot the program 10 years ago in the fall of 2014. And it was an amazing experience for our students. And the LMC was even generous enough to offer a few cash prizes to make it feel real for the 20 students who participated. And that was the first taste for me as an educator of incorporating these stories into the classroom. This work here by Emily Smith of Unsung Hero Helen Tossig was the work that actually won the pilot competition that year. And it was a fun group. They were super competitive, and they were truly fascinated with those stories. During this same time of integrating the pilot project, or the pilot ARTEFFECT project, one of the 20 students who was participating in the pilot competition discovered a story about a woman named Alice Seeley Harris, who was an English missionary and an early photographer whose work helped document and expose the human rights abuses in the Congo during the late 1800s. A group of 4 students, including Lexi, the student who created the pilot project image on the right there of Alice Seeley Harris, they all collaborated that year with a local friend and filmmaker named Josiah Ingstrom, and they produced a documentary titled Kodak in the Congo. And this Kodak in the Congo documentary is about Alice Seeley Harris, and I would encourage you to check it out. It's a pretty neat work, created by a group of high school students. During that same school year that these projects were happening in the classroom, as an artist, I was collaborating with a good friend and a former Milken Educator recipient named Michael Barrett, who had written a book, a children's book, and he was looking for an illustrator. So together, Michael and I created our first children's book titled The Hero Within, which is a resource for introducing unsung hero projects in the elementary classroom. Finally, the following year, I completed my master's degree, which I'd been working on for several years, which included a cornerstone exhibition that was a collection of all of the projects discussed, titled Unearthed: Discovering Heroes in the Classroom. And this had the big portraits, the pilot works for the ARTEFFECT, and then the illustrations for the children's book. So I'm very thankful, though, for just each of those projects and how they've helped me or helped shape myself as an educator and also as an artist. All right. So we're going to go ahead and transition into the lesson plan storytelling through art. And during the course of working on this lesson plan, one important realization that I had is that there's no right or wrong way to tell a story, much like there's really no right or wrong way to interpret a work of art. But I think it's important to note that there are two different lenses to consider when talking about storytelling. Stories are first told through the lens of the artist that creates the work, but later the real storytellers become the viewers of the work, each who comes with their own experiences and a unique lens that they view the work through, and therefore no stories are the same, or at least in terms of how they're interpreted. So the lesson is designed to be presented in 4 consecutive 50-minute periods. And after the 4th period, I would recommend a bit of time for students to discover, their unsung hero and select their unsung hero from the LMC's pre-approved list. And there are absolutely amazing stories on that list, stories that you've never heard of, that your students will have never heard of. And, having your students feel connected to a story they choose can, have a big impact on the success of the project for them. I love this quote by contemporary painter Bo Bartlett. A good piece of art is a really good open-ended question. This has so much truth in terms of how the best works of art induce excitement, curiosity, and a thirst for more information, which I feel is at the heart of a great artwork. So begin the lesson by engaging students in a conversation about what storytelling is, and ask students to reflect on the following questions in their sketchbooks, followed by a class discussion. Storytellers have an innate ability to see what is going on around them and then translate what they see and feel to others. So in today's lesson, we will become storytellers and practice seeing, sharing, and interpreting. So what are your thoughts on this first question here? Do all works of art tell stories, and why or why not? Feel free to put your thoughts in the chat and we'll give you a second here. Do all works of art tell stories? Why or why not?
Brad, and I also wanted to mention to everyone here, Brad has prepared an amazing lesson plan, and Emmy has posted the link to the lesson plan in the chat. So, and these slides call out step by step. So I just want to be sure that everyone has a copy of the lesson plan at hand, which you can pick up in the chat as we go through each step. And so go ahead and respond to do all works of art tell stories? Okay, we're starting to see some responses. We're getting some, mostly yes, Sarah says, but they don't always have to. Not all, but many do. So the majority is yes, but all artworks communicate, Rosie says, but they might not be stories. Yes, but different stories. They can, but not intentionally. Sometimes not a story, but a feeling. The story may only be internal to the artist. These are great responses. It's running across the spectrum. It gives a lot to think about. Sometimes communicate a feeling. If you say something or have something to share, it's always a story. That's interesting. Stories can be open to interpretation. Depends on the viewer. These are great. These are great responses. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I love what y'all are posting there. So kind of a follow-up to that is, so what are the components necessary to tell a story then? Like what are the raw ingredients in your guys' opinion, or in everyone's opinion?
Arcana says significant objects. Creativity, a character, depends on your audience. Point of view. Thank you, Julie. Deirdre says, questions answered: who, what, where, when, why, and how. Emotions, expressions, characters, a purpose. Veronica says character, plot, and setting. Great.
Great thoughts, yeah.
Details.
I had a conversation.
Elements that evoke a narrative. Oh, yep. Thank you, everyone.
I had a conversation with my AP class recently, and about some of those questions. And boy, in a classroom setting, students had some great thoughts. Boy, appreciate your participation there. So step 2, students will practice their observation, listening, and direction following skills. And this is one of my most favorite activities. And I had done this first probably 10 years ago at an art conference where an older art teacher than I had presented this to us. And I've used this ever since. But the idea in step 2 here is that in a classroom setting, you can have your students partner up into pairs with one person facing the projector or facing your monitor, while the other one faces away, looking completely away from it. And then each pair will take turns drawing and describing a work of art, and then switch positions and do it again. So I always feel that like maybe 8 to 10 minutes works out pretty well for this activity in a classroom. And then at the end of the 8 minutes, the student who was drawing can turn around and view the artwork that the other student has been describing to him that entire time. So let's give this a go. I'd like everyone to grab a pencil, a piece of paper, and I'm going to spend like the next 5 minutes or so describing an image that you'll get to see on the next slide here in a bit. And the work has a narrative, and you all are going to draw it based on just my description. So again, in a classroom setting, the way this would work is your students would be sitting across from each other, and there would be a conversation happening. And so if you had a class of 24 students, you'd have 12 groups. So 12 people would be talking at any given time. So I'm going to take a few minutes. I'm going to describe a work of art to you, and I just want you to listen. And then as you're listening, go ahead and begin to draw this. And then again, I'll show it to you at the end. So I always like to start off by just saying the direction of it. So this is a portrait format. So it's vertical in its format. And this is somewhat of a landscape. And I'll let you listen for a little bit, then I'll let you start to draw, but it's somewhat of a landscape. It has a horizon line that's very low in the composition, maybe like the bottom 1/8 of the composition. And there's 2 figures that are on the lower corners, on the lower left and lower right corner. And they're each holding a really tall pole. And the pole, if they are 6 feet, the pole is probably close to 20 feet tall. So go ahead and draw your horizon line in there. And one of the figures is facing out, holding this pole that goes from the bottom of the composition, the bottom left-hand corner, all the way to the top left corner. And they are just standing there holding it out with their 2 arms, and then looking back at the other person holding the other pole on the lower right-hand corner, who's wearing a dress, and they are turned around looking back at the other person. So they're communicating. There's obviously some kind of dialogue that they're working together here. So those 2 poles that they're each holding, as they stand there, go up to the top corners of the composition. And at the very top of those poles is what looks to be like a quilt that's draped across there, almost like a hammock. And that quilt, which is very colorful and has a very nice pattern on it, is holding what appears to be a very, very heavy stone. And that stone is round, and it's nested inside that hammock. And right above that round stone is a very, very small circle, which is the sun. And it appears that these 2 are holding this rock that's in this hammock, protecting this plant that is growing in between them. And so there's a really dark shadow because of that large stone that's in the hammock, and the shadow is covering up this plant. appears to be maybe protecting it. This plant is about half the size of the people, so it would go up to about their chest, maybe their waist or chest, and it has lots of little leaves on it. A couple other details on this. Right above that horizon line, the horizon line, it looks like they might be standing in a desert. There's a couple real subtle and easy rolling hills in the background. And then each of these figures that are holding these canopy sticks, they're wearing a mask. The one on the left appears to be wearing maybe a bird mask that's kind of wrapped around his head. And then the figure on the right that's wearing a dress appears to be wearing a fox head, kind of almost like a hat. Give you just a second here to kind of wrap that up. That was a lot of information to try to draw in a short amount of time. All right. So before we show you this image, this is like my most favorite part. If you've been drawing it that whole time and you've got this image that you know exactly what it looks like, you put it on paper, and then you get to see the image that the artist created. So here's a gift. I absolutely love the brain crunch you feel after using your imagination for several minutes. And then you get to see the original artist's interpretation. And we'll go ahead and put that up for you. So this is the work. So you all have just experienced the art of seeing and describing, which is the first step in the date model, which we'll discuss next. This activity can be followed up with a brief introduction to the artist of the work. So like in a classroom setting, I would, tell the students, this artist's name is Graham Francois. He's an artist and illustrator based out of Seattle, Washington. Graham works primarily with watercolor and gouache. He explores the connection and the lack of connection between humans and the natural world. And there's a sense of familiar and honesty within the characters and scenes, as well as the sense of mystery and wonder. And he's done years of these where he does one of these every day, kind of as his daily routine. So next, follow up the activity with a few questions for your students. These are a set of questions that can be used to assist your students in breaking down the piece visually. We'll focus just on the first one here. So feel free to leave your response to the question in the chat. What visual elements in the image help to communicate a story? Give you a minute to reflect on that and write that in the chat. What visual elements in the image help to communicate a story?
We're getting some responses in the chat, and I just wanted to, if you'd like to share your image somehow, we'd love to see it. And go ahead and post that in the chat if you can. And then we're getting some questions to, responses to your question here. The figures and what they're doing, characters looking at each other, the positioning, the figures facing each other, relationship between the figures. Sudie has posted her image. The care they are giving to the little tree, the shadows and weight of the rock, the contrast between the heavy rock and the delicate poles and the fabric. Oh, Erica, we would love to see your drawing. And we did see a couple of drawings. So yeah, we're getting some of the details, it sounds like. Some of the emotional things between the characters and some of the details that you were describing.
Very good. And boy, there's an art to seeing, but there's also an art to like describing. And so this is just such a great activity. I think I've loved this for the 10 years I've known about it. giving students that opportunity. So depending on the teacher, the students' routines, these questions can easily be swapped for more traditional visual thinking strategy questions, if preferred, which you may already be familiar with, such as like, what's going on here? What do you see that makes you say that? What more can we find? Then have students trade positions and repeat this. And then you can just run through that again. But this activity lets storytellers work their magic at the same time, the person describing and then the person drawing. And this step in the lesson plan can be modeled using your choice of narrative works of art. And naturally, the more passionate you are about the image that you're sharing with the students, just the better the activity goes. And it's such a great lead in to just talk or visit about storytelling.
Could I share something very briefly?
Yeah, go ahead, Veronica.
Hi. So I did my doctorate on English learners in the arts, and this activity, I've used it. It's so great to help with English learners because when the students are doing it together, they could ask clarifying questions, and that's such a key skill when English isn't your first language, to say like left or right. So then you're talking about directional and then adjectives, like when they're asking to be more descriptive. So a lot of adjectives, a lot of obviously nouns. So it's such a great activity for English learners, and it really helps them with their skill set. And then the negotiation of meaning that happens between students, like, did you mean this, or all of that? And again, those are really critical skills when you're learning a new language. So this is an awesome activity. Thank you for sharing it with us, Brad.
Thanks for sharing that, Veronica. I love that. And
Thank you, Veronica. Oh, and Brad, there's a question before we move on. I wanted to see if you could give us some guidance. Leah has asked, when you do this activity with students, is the person who's drawing allowed to ask questions?
yes, very much so. And so it looks a little different than what we just did, because there's a dialogue, kind of like Veronica said, where you're asking each other questions. And I always encourage students to try not to talk with their hands, not to point, but to only use their words. And it's tough. It really is. All right, in step 3, the teacher will use the date model slideshow resource to introduce students to the date model and examine visual narratives. Students will interact with a variety of ARTEFFECT award-winning student artworks and practice how to interpret works of art. So from my experience with working with students, there's definitely an art to seeing while visiting museums. This is a tool that enables students to feel comfortable and confident when interacting with a work of art. So this is one of the resources that you can print out and hand out to your students. This is the date model. And so DATE is an acronym, and I'm not probably a big acronym person as far as remembering things, but this one to me is dynamite as far as how useful it is. It's easy to remember. Once you have it in your pocket, you can actually use it without somebody even knowing you're using it. But how to impress your date at the art museum. So the D is just to describe what you see objectively, which is kind of what we just did. The A is analyze how the artists use the elements of art and principles of design in their artwork. So you're trying to kind of break that down and kind of think like the artist, try to analyze how they did that. The T is my favorite, which is, translating the meaning and or the narrative components of the work. And, no right or wrong way to translate. There's a million different stories that are told from the same work, oftentimes, based on how people interpret it differently. And then E, evaluate the artwork. Is it successful or not? And, quick story, this has been probably 10 years ago or so. My wife, I was always trying to take her out and view artwork, like go out to First Friday art shows. And I would be like, hey, Candace, you want to go out to the First Friday show tonight? And she would always just be like, no. And I mean, this went on over and over again, like, hey, let's go out tonight. It's First Friday. No. And finally I was like, hey, like, why don't you ever want to go out and look at art with me? That's like something I love to do. I'm an artist and an art teacher. And she just had a real quick answer. She was like, because all you ever do is say, And I was really puzzled by that. And then Fast forward a month or two, I finally talked her into going out on a date, and we went into Kansas City. We're in this gallery, and we walk in and standing in front of this $40,000 painting. And I mean, I was just in awe of it. And out of nowhere, I get elbowed in the side really hard. And I was like, what was that for? And she said, because you're doing it. And I was like, I'm doing what? And she said, you're doing the thing. And sure enough, for like the rest of that night, I caught myself doing it over and over and over again. And it was horrible. But in that moment, I said, hey, this is something I do with my students, how to impress your date at the art museum. And so her and I literally stood in front of that $40,000 painting, and we had the best conversation, just kind of going through that model. So have students fill out the date model worksheet while viewing a variety of artworks in your slideshow, and you can use that. So I'd like to take just a minute here and have a few volunteers that would be willing to break down the 4 components of the date model. Each of you taking maybe just like 30 to 40 seconds to do this. And you can unmute yourself and so that we can all hear you. So go ahead and raise your digital hand on there if you would be willing to take 30 to 40 seconds and run through this with us. Do either the describe, analyze, translate, or the evaluate of this artifact entry by 8th grader student Abby on. And then Tony will call on you here in a second to unmic yourself. So we'll begin with the describe of this work. And I have a good friend in town who runs a gallery. His name is Stephen Smith, and he was telling me a story kind of fairly recently about a patron who came into his gallery wanting to buy an artwork, and he was blind, but he was a collector, which is kind of an interesting thing. But he had been a collector before he went blind, and so he went in and he was interested in a specific artist, and so Stephen had to describe his artworks that he had available to him, which is another good way to kind of explain what that D component is. So, all right, I'll let Tony call on a few of you, and we'll just run through this real quick. Describe,
right.
translate, evaluate.
Oh, all right. So we're going to start with D, describe objectively what you see. So let's go ahead and just go ahead and unmute if you want to jump in and go ahead. I see Katie. I'm going to call on Katie. She's right in front of me. Katie, do you want to give it a go? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sure. Okay, so describe. I see a younger person looking at film. Obviously intrigued. Looks like paper and acrylic paint, watercolor, maybe some colored pencil. And then analyze. They've done a really good job of capturing like the fabric and the lighting and the fact that it's a film strip and there's the camera and there's some sort of film developing going on. I like the color scheme. And then translate, what is translate?
Translate the meaning of the work, in your opinion. What does this work mean?
To me, it means that there's somebody who cares a lot about their pictures, sending a message maybe with their pictures, and taking time and care and curiosity to find the best ones to share. And then evaluate the art. Is that evaluate the art or evaluate? Okay, never mind, I see it.
Evaluate the success of the work.
I think it was done well. Like I said, the color scheme really draws you in, and then there's a sense of like softness to it, with the lighting hitting the objects that are obviously meaningful to the person looking at the film strip, and maybe the people who are also looking at the painting. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for jumping in.
Yeah, that was great, Katie. And I appreciate you doing that. And when you get down to translating and evaluating, that's where it becomes very subjective. You might have two people who interpret it completely different and or who think it's successful or not. So great job. All right, students then choose their unsung hero in step 4. So there's currently over 130 unsung heroes to choose from and counting from all walks of life and areas of interest. Their hero must be an individual from the approved list from the Little Milken Center for Unsung Heroes. And I mean, this list is long and it is fascinating, and they're very obscure, but absolutely amazing unsung heroes. This is a crucial step in the lesson plan, and a moment where you might pause for a few days to let them really interact with the stories until they make a relevant connection to the story, or because they feel that they are most passionate about. This connection creates the driving force for the project, though. And I have definitely noticed that over the years. The students that have that buy-in, they feel that connection with the unsung hero, and there's definitely one in there for everybody. When they make that connection, it's like fire. Step 5 introduces the unsung heroes journey diagram, which includes the 6 key components to help them deconstruct their story. After selecting their LMC unsung hero, students can then acclimate themselves to the story by completing the unsung heroes worksheet. So this step in the lesson plan, I'll be honest, is the one that I think I'm the most excited about. And this is the one where I think you can go from good to great, or help students go from good to great. And so there's different entry points, and then there's different areas within this wheel that they can kind of focus in on, but number one is kind of the starting point for everybody is having to decide who their unsung hero is. And then moving into that problem, what was the problem that they observed? And each one of these components, like 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, those 5 can really be at the heart of what the students wrap their brain around and what they focus on. Moving into that heroic actions, how did they solve the problem? And then this is when you can ask your students, what does it look like to stand up for what you believe in? I mean, like what does that visually look like in an inanimate object that you would create? Moving into sacrifice, what did they sacrifice for others? Impact, what impact did their actions have on others? I mean, these are all the ingredients that make a hero unsung and make a true hero. And then into your heroic traits, again, this is an opportunity to ask them those questions. What does humility look like? What does courage look like? Those heroic traits are really unique and really different. And any of these areas, again, can be an excellent place to enter as you jump in and you begin helping your students create their work. This diagram, though, it's definitely inspired by author Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. The visual can be very useful in helping students identify or deconstruct the key ingredients that make their hero unsung. So once these components are focused in on, they can create their personal recipe of telling their story, which is where the real fun begins, I think, on the project. Students will then use the worksheet to begin deconstructing their LMC Unsung Heroes story in search of an entry point to inspire their visual components needed to create their work of art. And this printable resource, it has just all those steps from the Unsung Heroes journey. In visual storytelling, students will want to, be intentional about using an image to communicate. So, what is it they want to share? What part of their story is a must to include? How can these musts coexist in a singular work of art? So in step 6, students will plan out their artworks using information from the Unsung Hero Journey worksheet in the form of thumbnail sketches. And I've always thought about, like, as an art teacher, like if I'm doing a still life and painting, I mean, I can have students walk in the room and 15 minutes later, they're getting started on their project. But, definitely on this project, there's moments in the lesson plan where you have to really kind of let things kind of marinate a little bit, or, let the students really kind of find their focus and develop their idea. And that's one of the steps here. So hand out copies of the thumbnail sketch worksheet, visit with students about their examples provided and how they will begin designing their composition with written visual brainstorming or thumbnail sketches, and then compositional experimentation really with the goal of solving the best way to tell their LMC Unsung Heroes story. This is a time where, you can encourage students to consider, excuse me, the different points of view to tell their story from. What perspectives will students use to tell their story through the lens of the unsung hero? It's like maybe using a first person point of view, or maybe through the lens of those who benefited from the actions, third person. And then, we just really want to encourage you to consider, or for your students to consider, maybe an abstract viewpoint, that challenges viewers' perceptions, or maybe a conceptual quality or use of materials, processes, or ideas.
Brad, I'm gonna jump in
Yeah.
just for a second because we have a question, and while we're on this topic, Deidre is asking storyboards. So I'm just wondering, can you clarify between thumbnail sketching and storyboarding?
Yeah, so when I think of storyboarding, at least for me, I'm thinking either animation or film, or it could be like a comic book strip. And at this point, the artifact, I don't think we're accepting animated works or film, but you could definitely storyboard, I think, which is a great idea if you wanted to do, more of a comic book strip, or, something with multiple images, for sure. It's a good question.
Oh, great, thank you. And I just also want to point out, Emmy is putting all of the links to your resources in the chat, but these are all embedded within the lesson plan. And so to thank you again, Brad, for creating all of these individual worksheets that are just turnkey resources for our group.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways that you can make this lesson plan your own. There might be just a couple of these things that you really want to focus on, or maybe use all of them, or maybe even use them for other projects. But yeah, we're going to do another quick drawing activity. And you'll need, again, a piece of paper and pencil for this one. And this can be done in the classroom to warm students up before beginning the thumbnail sketch worksheet. And I know a lot of you that are art educators have those conversations with students about, just the importance and the value of an idea, and the connection between process and product, and how during that ideation portion, it's so important just to be able to let out ideas and to create or generate ideas. So draw 15 circles on your paper about the size of a quarter, and you're going to have 2 minutes to create as many original designs in each circle that you can in that limited amount of time. And what we're going to do here is, in response to the second key step on the Unsung Hero Journeys diagram, which is the problem. Again, like, what was the problem that they observed? Kind of connecting to that, let's focus in on the idea of conflict. So use line that connects with the concept of conflict within each of those little circles, and see how many you can fill up in 2 minutes. Sound good? All right. Let you begin. We'll see if anybody can finish 15.
Okay, so, oops, sorry, just to be clear, we are filling in as many, we're drawing circles, we're drawing as many lines as we can in the circles.
Yeah. So the idea, yeah, is that you're coming up with designs within each circle using line, and line used expressively in a way that feels like it could connect to conflict.
Okay.
Yeah. I like Connor's choice of music. Feels kind of gritty and conflicted. Yeah, we have a great question here in the chat. I'm going to kind of address this while was that 2 minutes, Connor? Okay. Go ahead and stop right there and we'll see. Did anybody finish all 15? That's a lot to try to accomplish in only 2 minutes, but if you don't mind holding those up and just kind of sharing them. So,
Right. Take a look.
good.
Oh, all right, Rebecca, Norcana. Wow, okay, Eleni, that's almost to the bottom. I think we might have cut you a little short on the 2 minutes, but you would have been there. Mindy, thank you.
Those are good. Real quick, there's a question in the chat. So kind of talking about working with younger elementary students. However, do you have any points about how to keep this more objective? I'm concerned my younger students, having been in actual war situations, might become too emotional. Any tips? I mean, that's a good question, especially working with students who have potentially been in those situations. Yeah, I think just being very sensitive. If it was a younger student, there might be a way to maybe focus in specifically on one or two unsung heroes that their stories might be able to bridge into that easier or in a more uplifting way, maybe. I don't know. That's a tough one though. Right. So the visual brain dump worksheet that we just did, there's a worksheet that you can download and print that with 30 circles that can be printed out and used with your students, and then you can regulate the time on that. You can approach that a lot of different ways. I've only done this with circles, but obviously you could do it with squares or rectangular format as well. Step 7 is an opportunity to discuss with students what materials and processes they will use to create their project. And they are welcome to work in 2D or 3D. And I mean, there's this project can really fit into almost any class. I mean, again, animation would be a sticky one maybe at this point, but almost any visual art class that you can think of. It could even be photography. So mixed media, any of those types of things. And I think that is there a special call this year, Tony, for large format works too? Is that right?
Yes, there is. Thank you for the plug there. We're having a competition, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. And in the competition, there is a special prize category for large format, anything greater than 24 by 36 inches, as well as 3D artworks.
Great. All right. Step 7.5 has access to the rubric that is used to judge the projects. So just kind of take note on that 40-40-20 split. And then if desired, you can access works from previous years with the provided link and then have students access the work and compare scores if you wanted to. That's always kind of a nice introduction to let students use those rubrics to grade or assess other works. And then this is the official rubric and available to download and print as needed as well. And then finally, it's time to make art. Finally, students will need to invest a significant amount of time creating their artwork. This graphic kind of emphasizes the need to create synthesis between these three components of the project, which includes the materials and processes used to physically create the work, the interpretation of the LMC Unsung Heroes story, and then the information provided in their impact statement. And you can see this in step 10. But revisions rather should be considered and made when necessary while creating the work of art, and then reference made to their thumbnail planning worksheets. But encourage your students to consider how the materials and processes used might inform the LMC Unsung Heroes story as well. And I think that there's a lot of room for exploring how symbolism can be embedded within the materials used to create the work. And those are just opportunities, I think, to go beyond, portraiture, which is a great thing and a great entry as well. But, trying to even push them up to the next level. Providing your students the opportunity to talk about their work with others and or to hear about each other's unsung hero stories is an important part of the storytelling component of the project. And again, both the artist and the audience become the storytellers. And I like to start off critiques with new students by emphasizing that we all look at and we experience and appreciate artwork differently. And I like to pull this graphic up sometimes when it's the first time I've critiqued with a group, and we talk about, you know, are you an emotionalist? Do you appreciate emotion in work and the message that it shares? Or are you a realist? Are you most impressed and interested in realistic qualities communicated in traditional art making? Or are you a formalist? Are the, you know, design principles, use of materials a must have in a work of art for you as an entry point when experiencing art? You know, or are you a mixture of two or more of those things? And then in a classroom setting, I'll have that up on the projector, and then I have my students vote with their feet and just kind of get them up and moving. You know, hey, if you're a emotionalist, I want you to stand in this corner of the room. You know, if you're a realist, on this side. And it gives your students a quick glimpse at how each have a different value system when looking at it. None which are more correct than another. So take a second, and in the chat, if each of you would be willing just to plug in which of these you feel like you most closely identify with as an artist or a teacher. And if you're an art teacher in a department with multiple art teachers, this is so fun to, or like during a PLC, to bring this up and then communicate with each other, you know, what the heart of your interpretation as an artist is and as an educator. And I know for our department, it was a great conversation.
Great. Well, I think we're seeing a lot of emotionalists. It seems like we're getting most of this group is responding to that. Expressive qualities in an artwork to be most important, but we do have some realists. We do have people that are saying they're both or more, two or more. And then just a few formalists. That's interesting. Not getting as many formalists. Emotional realists, emotional formalists. Okay, so now the formalists are coming up. So interesting.
And we don't have time, but I would love to, like, you know, hear every one of you talk about why it is you're passionate about that. I know for me, I'm a formalist, and I know that, but I just feel like the formal qualities have to be met before I can really fully appreciate and get to the emotional content. But all right, very good. The tag method for critiquing, this has become one of my most favorites in the last few years. Students take turns during a critique, and this allows me to kind of sit back more and then just let the students kind of take care of the critique themselves. But tag just stands for the T for telling their peers something specific that they like about a work of art. The A is for asking them a question about their work, and then followed by giving them a suggestion that they could do to make the work stronger. And I just love that rotation, and it kind of keeps things hopping and moving. Extension 2 activity provides you with a printed resource that you can use to have a written critique. You know, this resource can be easily adapted to any size of class and use as much or as little as desired. And I recommend using maybe 6 to 10 minutes per work as students rotate through. And then the worksheets broken down with the areas students give their peers both cool and warm constructive feedback. I know I had probably taught almost 10 years before I had ever seen that done when I did an observation and an area teacher, and just loved how that looked in a classroom setting. And then finally, in step 10, students will wrap up their project by writing an impact statement of 500 to 1,000 words. And there's 4 components that students will want to focus in on when they write this. And students may create a rough draft for their impact statement using this next resource, which can be printed and handed out as well. and just a real simple resource where it breaks it down into those 4 areas that they want to address when they write their statement. And I think sometimes, handwriting that and addressing it before you transition into a digital doc can be helpful. And then the final extension activity for the lesson is for elementary age students, considering the project where you can read the book The Hero Within to your students. And then this is just a great way to introduce the concept of creating a project about unsung heroes. And on that previous question that somebody asked about the elementary age student, this is just a great resource. My friend Michael wrote a great story, and this is a quick read, 10-minute read to your students, and then they're engaged and ready to go out and discover a hero on their own. So the lesson plan that we've been talking about connects to Common Core standards for ELA. If you're in a situation where those need to be addressed, I'm not going to read through those, but these are all in the lesson plan. It also has Common Core standards for literacy and history and social studies, and then a number of the national visual art standards as well. So, and that's all I have. If anybody has any questions for Tony or myself, or I'd be happy to try to field anything.
All right, thank you so much, Brad. So we do have some time. And you put a lot in that last section. So I just want, let's open it up and see if anyone has any questions. I know there's some coming through the chat. So I will take a look at the chat to go back to see what questions we can address. And if anyone has a question right now for Brad, just go ahead and unmute yourself. And yeah, we can kind of catch
Hey,
up.
Tony and Brett.
Yes,
This is
Jennifer.
I had a question on the date model. Is that attributed to anyone specific, or is that Brad's specific model that he developed? I didn't catch that part.
Yeah, no, it's not Brad specific. I attended an IB conference out in Denver probably 10 years ago, and I can't remember the name of the art teacher that shared it, but that's where I stole that one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You bet.
We're getting just some comment from Jessica about working with special education students. And have you any tips for working with special ed students and storytelling or any of these strategies?
Yeah, boy, different SPED students or students maybe with IEPs. Again, maybe that children's book again would be a great read to kind of approach that from a slightly different slant. Maybe leaning into just a portrait or something a little bit simpler on that as far as the storytelling element, or maybe they could and that's a good question. I think there could be different approaches where it would be interesting to maybe try to partner them up with a peer, like do kind of a peer tutor type thing, where one of their peers could help them as well.
Great, yeah, thank you. Right, so let's see, any other questions we have for Brad while we have him here? Can you give, here's something from Mindy in the chat. Mindy says, can you give any tips for implementing this with students who, maybe younger or writing skills? I guess we just possibly addressed that, the worksheet, maybe starting with the story. I don't know if you have other add-ins there, Brad. I know we have Elisa on the call who has worked with younger students to, teaching the Unsung Heroes to her 4th graders with great success.
I do want to point out too that like there's some big prize money involved, and that can become a huge motivator for a lot of students, which is an amazing thing in the classroom. But at the end of the day, I think the most important part is giving an opportunity for those students to interact with some of those stories, and that's something that any student at any level can do and do well with the assistance of a teacher or a peer.
Great. Let's see if there's any other questions.
Yeah.
I just want to recap and thank you so much, Brad, for all of the things that you took us through. The careful looking and the observation is so important as just a first step in really understanding how a work of art is constructed. And so I really like the scanning and describing exercise. Veronica, who's on the call, and I used to teach in a museum. We used to do something called the 30-second look, where you just have students look at a work of art for 30 seconds and try to describe everything. But it's just the same kind of thing, that like the importance of what you can take in. And so beginning with that was really great. The date activity that we've been discussing, the brainstorming, which we know is the brain dump, the best way to get a good ideas, to get a lot of ideas. And we were seeing some variations of that exercise in the chat that came through. And then the journey map, which is at the core of where we're starting with the storytelling. And, does a story have to have character, setting, plot? But you've really tailored it in a way that's so useful to unsung heroes who have gone through and made a sacrifice. And we often don't think of sacrifice, but these unsung heroes have done something altruistic that was in service to others in society, and that inherently comes with a sacrifice, whether it's a social challenge or some other challenge or adversity, and that or something that they've had to overcome or extend themselves. And so that was really nice part of that journey map, and helping students to enter into a story beyond just the portrait. Because they could go anywhere on that map, as you mentioned, as a starting point for where they're feeling a connection to championing this unsung hero story. And then I wanted to underscore how you were giving us a way to understand how to judge works of art. And really that begins with understanding our own perception, like how we as the viewer are judging not just this outside work of art, but the values that we're ascribing to it, whether we're feeling from the emotional or the realist or the formalist point of view. So there's and all the other resources that I can't mention. So thank you so much for this lesson plan, Brad. It's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this rolls out with our ambassadors and our art educators joining on the call.
You bet. Hey, Tony, I want to real quick pipe in here. Somebody in the response there mentioned that they use superheroes as a model for their SPED students. That's such a great idea, as far as, heroes that they're familiar with, and it could give them the same taste of those character traits and such. I love that.
Great. So we only have a few minutes, and if you have questions, you can go ahead and post it in the chat or think of some questions. As we wrap up, I just want to share a little bit about what's coming up with ARTEFFECT. And so I mentioned at the beginning that ARTEFFECT runs a student art competition. Our ambassadors know this. For those of you new on the call, ARTEFFECT has been running an annual student art competition since 2016, as you heard from Brad as well. We have over 3,000 students from around the world that have been participating in the ARTEFFECT annual competition. It's for students in grades 6 through 12. Some of our ambassadors have had students submit and win in the competition. And so what the competition is that students will choose an unsung hero from the expanding list that the center has, and then they will tell that story creatively in a work of art, whether it's 2D or 3D. And we have if you could just go back for a second, Connor, I just want to talk about the prizes. So here you can see the prize categories that we have: a grand prize of $6,000. These are unrestricted funds. And then categories for high school, middle school spotlight prizes this year, which are 3D and large format that I mentioned. Also, if you select some unsung heroes that have been chosen annually on that list, and certificates of excellence and honorable mentions. And then there's a digital poster that you may have been seeing that's shown here. We have a download if you'd like to print that out for your classroom. And on the next slide that we were just on, you can see the steps to apply. If you would like assistance with bringing this into your classroom, feel free to reach out to our team. We can provide some more information and support you through the submission projects. But basically, students choose the unsung hero, review the guidelines, there's a judging rubric, the impact statement, outline. They create the original work of art, the impact statement, really looking at the unsung hero as a role model, and in creative ways. So the judging is weighted more with creative interpretations of interesting ways to get into the story of the unsung hero. And then there's an online portal for submitting. The competition is open until April 27th of 2025. So yeah, and then we also have coming up some additional, I just wanted what's coming next, just kind of show you what's ahead. So we have an open house. If you're interested in learning more about the competition, everyone's invited to this, no matter where you are with ARTEFFECT. So please join us January 15th, 4 to 5 p.m. and we'll go through the competition. We'll hear from some previously participating teachers. And then we have 2 more modules this year, Unsung Heroes in STEAM, coming up on January 22nd. And Art Making and Design for Social Impact on February 26th from 4 to 5:15 p.m. Pacific time. And you can register if you are new to ARTEFFECT. You can register to receive the session recording of the lesson plan, and our ambassadors will be on the call, and we'd love to see you again on the call. And what else do I want to tell you? There's a certificate of participation for those of you who would like that. Emmy is posting that link in the chat, so you can get credit for this evening's participation. And I just want to thank everyone again. So I'd like to thank you, Brad, again for this robust session, for taking us through various angles into the storytelling narrative artworks. I'd like to thank everyone here for joining. It's just kind of wonderful to see so many of the ambassadors on the call. I'm looking right at Stevie here, so right in front of me. But yeah, it's wonderful to see everyone. Looking forward to hearing how this is working in your classrooms and communities. And please sign up for that one-to-one if you haven't already, and we can get these conversations connected with your classrooms. I want to thank everyone who's new to ARTEFFECT and returning as well, who's in our extended community, for being on the call this evening. Just feel free to reach out to us if there's anything that we can do. Also to thank our funder, Mr. Lowell Milken, for making this program possible. And yeah, if there's any other questions before Brad has left his email here very generously. Thank you for putting that there. And here's our ARTEFFECT email in case you have any questions. And Emmy, is there any questions that we should address before we sign off?
I think we're good to go. If I've messaged you in the chat letting you know that I'll connect with you, I'll be sure to follow up soon. But thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
And thank you, Dina, who's just writing quickly in the chat. Nice to see you here. So let's unmute and we can say a collective goodbye. We'll definitely see you in January, and we'll be in communications on email.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye.
holidays.